I am trying to build a lightweight European muscle car from a pair of old BMWs. Now, it's not been simple. I can't really see any way of twisting the rack to make it any better. We have to make up this piece from scratch to be exactly the right length to fit back in, so it works with all of this. Basically, it's a right headache. At this point in time, I don't know exactly how I'm going to move forward. Of course, most things are solvable, so join me as we continue with the Z4 M3 project. Back to the Beamer build. I'll pick up from where we left off. I think we should take a little break from the diff. Let's mix things up a bit. I want to address this engine and the issue with alignment. I had a comment from, I'll shout you out, from Stephen Robert. He says, I would swap the M3 steering completely with the front subframe. Now when I read that I thought, yeah, that's going to be easy. Not, but will it? That's an avenue I am willing to have a look at because it does make a lot of sense, as I wouldn't need to make custom engine mounts, but I would upgrade them. We have the location for that. Those are all in place, and we know the steering does clear everything engine wise, and importantly this would clear the manifold. However, there are a few things we would need to check, mainly the gap between the chassis legs, and if I was to guess, I would say this engine bay is going to be narrower. 710mm. Let's check the M3, 740. Using my incredible maths, that's going to be 30mm wider for the M3, meaning we're going to lose 15mm either side. My concern is we'll have contact with the chassis leg where this knuckle ends up. Not to say we can't get around the problem, it might be workable. I need to take all of this apart anyway, so I'm willing to try it all on the Z4, see what we'd have to change to the mounting points of the frame. Potentially we could use all the brake suspension components as one and bolt it straight onto the car. Let's get it all removed, then see how it fares up on the car. I start by removing the caps that cover the top of the top mounts. I just want to make sure I don't need any special tools to get these dampers off. It's good to see they're just 13mm nuts. I then go on to disconnecting the rigid brake line that joins the brake hose, which goes to the front calipers. I start on the near side, then I move on to the off side. With that taken care of, I move on to the top mounts. I crack off those nuts on the top, then buzz them off with a gun. You can see these are special nuts. They have a sleeve on them, which locates the aluminium bracket that hold the engine bay strut braces. I'm going to keep these because I may be able to utilise them. I now need to lift the car up in the air so I can start dropping the subframe off. I think the engine crane is going to be required. It's moments like these I always make sure the camera's rolling in times of sketchiness. When I was referring to the sketchiness, do you think air bricks are going to hold the car up? My concern is that it slips off the jack stands at the back. We'll see how we go on. I carefully use the engine crane to get the car up in the air. We have self-removing suspension. Get these bricks under. I am saying now, I do not condone this behaviour. Once I get enough height, I can get the wheels off, which will allow me to get those rusty car ramps out from the underside. Then I can put my ill-advised air bricks stacked on top of each other under the left and right hand side of the car. The car's stripped, so it doesn't weigh a lot anymore. It should hold up. It appears to be alright, but I do know for a fact those air bricks are made of paper mache. Okay. Let's get the subframe off. While I support the front subframe and suspension assembly with the engine crane, I take out the 4 remaining bolts. As soon as the bolts came out, I took up the tension on the crane. Then once I cleared the locating dowels on the front chassis leg, I could carefully lower the subframe down. I'll take the suspension assemblies off separately. I'll leave the rack on the subframe, probably the easiest thing to do. Let's soak some of these and I'll start taking bits off. I start removing the suspension components from the subframe. Fortunately for me, none of the bolts are seized. I'm able to get the drop links removed, however I'm probably going to have to cut the track rods off. The nuts are just turning, and to be honest I can't be arsed to mess around with them too much. They're not exactly expensive, we probably won't even need them anyway. Once I get the grinder out, it doesn't take long to completely destroy the track rods, then gravity did the rest. Come on. There we go. One side free. With everything loosened and taken apart, it's now just a case of rattling it free. With a bit of a wiggle and a waggle, stubborn little, it comes apart. There we go. Other side free. Just imagine if this could actually work and I can use the subframe, it would make it a lot easier. In the back of your mind there's always that glimmer of hope. Ultimately though, we're going to find out. There goes the engine mount. Before I attempt to get the subframe onto the car, I need to get the Z4 one removed. To do that, I need to get the engine support back on top of the engine. I'll get it hoisted up and then we'll start pulling bits off. Firstly, I need to remove the air intake box from the top of the engine, as this is where the engine support will sit. Once that's removed, I can get a strap around the engine itself. After I've made sure it's tight enough around the engine, in order to get enough tension on it, once I take up the slack with the hook on the crane, then I can wind it up and take the weight off the subframe. When installing the strap, I am doing my best not to foul anything that could get damaged. I have taken enough tension up on the engine now so I can unbolt the subframe. I will need to remove the anti-roll bar, which I haven't done as of yet, because I will show you in a minute, but the M3 roll bar is part of the subframe. At this stage I don't really know what will be used and what won't. Possibly nothing at this point. Before I do remove the subframe, I'll take the measurement from the floor to the underside of the frame. That means I'll have note of the ground clearance when I get this thing up there. I'll know where this one can go and if it can go up or down, or we're just going to find out, aren't we? 387. I'm telling you, this could sort so many issues if it works. It really would be nice. It would sort so many of the problems out that we've been having so far when it comes to the steering. Also things like clearance from the exhaust and the lower arms. Tolerances would be really tight between the Z4 and the M3 parts. If I can get this subframe and steering to work in harmony with the engine, then we can see how far we can go with using the M3 parts on the front. We could have complete suspension arms and brakes. Then we'd need to figure out the alignment for the damping and the uprights. I did think I took all the weight off the subframe, but still need to go up a little ways. I think I'm going to slowly lower the subframe, see what happens. Once I plucked up the courage, I entirely removed the Z4 frame, and there goes the engine alignment, which I spent hours getting right. Started swinging to the offside now. I've got both of the subframes. I'll do some simple measurements for curiosity purposes. That's exactly 800 mil. That is 10 mil narrower, 790. Which doesn't really mean anything anyway because it won't be in the right place. But let's get this offered up. Before I do, I think it's time to get the uprights off the front of this. It will give me a lot more space to see what's going on. I'll try and get these brake lines apart without destroying them, then we'll get them out. Carefully and slowly, I start removing the brake line. It's quite easy to start twisting the hard line around on itself, and eventually they break that way. It's not the end of the world if they do break, but it's always nice to get them off clean. Once the near side is removed, I do exactly the same on the offside. Now I've got these out of the way, I can remove the entire assemblies. I start on the near side, I remove 3 nuts on the top mount. I can take the weights with one hand and undo them from the top with the other. Guess who forgot to take the sensors out of the mounts? Me. Stupid man. I will be interested to see how these weigh up compared to the M3 ones. I've only got a speed sensor on this side, which I've definitely pulled off the chassis now. Learn from your mistakes. Same procedure on the offside. Once this is off, we can do the all-important M3 subframe test fit. Right then. Wish us luck. Where's Jack when I need him? Yeah, not a chance in hell I'm going to be able to lift this. The one reference point I have when it comes to aligning the frame to the engine is the engine mount. This is the only one I have intact, which sits in there. This part is still on the engine, which sits onto the stud. Unfortunately, the other one is destroyed. At least we have one, which will gauge the height nicely overall. Still, my primary concern is getting this up, avoiding the chassis leg. I just need to come up with a way of lifting this up. I've managed to get it up onto a couple of blocks. The smart thing to do is probably to try and get it bolted up on that mount, whilst guiding the rack and linkage up that side. We'll give it a go. As I lift the M3 subframe up into place, I already spot a problem. I've seen a problem. In order to get the mount high enough, I need to take this part of the frame off as it's starting to foul the chassis leg. Also, in order to test fit this properly, I need to get the engine back over in the middle, try and push it that way. The usual story with this thing. The tolerances are going to be so tight to get this to work. I need to give myself every opportunity I can for this to even attempt to work. Okay. Can work with that. There is nothing on the car close to this for this to even be utilized, so it makes sense to remove this. That also goes for the offside. I'll pull it back out To proceed, we need to start cutting more bits off these parts, which you'll probably see more of as we move forward in this project. Many things will have to be destroyed before we can build it all back up, bigger and stronger. I have to remove the aluminium from the frame in sections in order to get the smaller disc into the areas I need to. I work my way around both sides, then try and make it as flush as I can in order to get the subframe high enough onto the chassis leg of the Z4. Both sides are now trimmed up. Time for a second fit. We're getting much closer. Not quite close enough. Yeah, this is going to be a lot of work, I can see. To be honest, I need to get it up higher, have it sat as high as it will go, to see what needs to change in relation to the subframe and the legs of the chassis. I'll find some more stuff and we'll get this much higher up. I found some more air bricks. It's just a case of lifting up one side at a time. Slowly but surely, I managed to build up some height. Come on. Yikes. Kind of works. Good old bricks. Okay, progress is progress. I need to keep an eye on this, which is there at the minute, but I have no idea on the alignment yet. The subframe needs to go way over, I think. Now I just need to fine tune it to see exactly what we're dealing with. I think it's approximately in the center now. As I did predict, the steering is right up against the chassis leg. My concern is contact with the chassis leg, which is not to say it's not doable, as it still comes out at a good angle, and a tiny bit of notching there won't be a problem. The other thing I have noticed, it's probably quite hard to see, the angle of the engine mount is suggesting that the frame needs to be tilted up at the front. This means I'll have to try and bring the level down on the subframe and then modify the chassis leg. That will have to be done to get it high enough. If we do get to the point where I can use this, I plan on modifying it from there back, so the M3 mounting points can be matched to the holes already in the Z4. That can be done with some custom aluminium fabrication. The big question is at the moment, can the frame even go high enough to support the engine on these chassis legs? That's what we need to find out. There is quite a lot to consider here. If I choose to go down this route, I've worked out I'll need to do some almost irreversible changes to the Z4, including cutting out the mount for the anti-roll bar. I could end up with a lot of work needing done to the car and a useless subframe. I want to consider a few more variants between the subframes. I'll get this one back off from under the car, then I'll run you through my thoughts. There's no real elegant way of doing this. We have Z4 set up. This is the rack I tried to modify to use on that one. We know we have a clearance issue with the engine. At the end of the day, that is the only real issue we have with using the original subframe. The collector pipe going towards the back of the car on both sides of the engine do kind of touch these mounts, but we can remedy that with a simple spacing between the mount and the chassis. The reason I'm concerned to use the M3 subframe with the uprights, brakes, etc. is the distance between the top mounts. The M3 is about 60mm wider, so even if it did work on the height and the geometry, to get the camber right, we would have to bring these out about 30mm. That would be a lot of work, and the fact that this Z4 is already proven, I do like the way it is from the factory. I don't want to mess with that too much. That really leads me on to the question of, is it a good idea to do away with this, but try and get this to work on the Z4 frame? I haven't quite figured out how that's going to work yet, but I do think it's an avenue worth pursuing. In order to drive this plan forward, I first need to get the rack that I tried to modify. This is because I need to take the measurement of how much room I have to play with when trying to fit the M3 rack. There's not a lot of room between the sump and the bit where the pickup pipe in the bottom of the engine is located, and within those 2 points is where the Z4 subframe sits. Once I get my measurements, I can then remove the rack, then start disassembling the M3 parts. Once I got it removed, I can then offer it up to the Z4 frame. I think the only way I'm going to find out is to get it up on the car. I'm slightly concerned that this gap's going to be too big. But wait, there's more. I first need to remove the hydraulic line from the M3 rack, as they run right in the way of me even attempting to get this into place. Let's get these off and try not to make a mess. I carefully remove the 2 hard hydraulic lines. Then once clear, I cover with some tape so I don't get contaminants into the rack. I'm really hoping it will actually fit. It's like the line of the episode. I really hope that this is going to work. Damn. It's hard to say. To be confirmed. You may also be thinking, wasn't that the issue we had before on the other racks with it touching the sump around that area? But because this is much wider and it still has to go over more, this area here may end up out from underneath altogether. After much trimming, testing the fitment and more trimming, this is where we've ended up. It's good enough to get tested on the car. There's a reasonable amount cut out. But before you come out and go, oh, it's not going to be strong enough, it's weak now, hold your thoughts, because we can remedy that. Ah! Ow! That hurt right on the corner. It's gonna sting. I've lost count how many times I've got the subframe on and off the car now. Once it's loosely back on, I need to see if I can get the rack installed after it's bolted up. Otherwise it needs to come back off, and then I'll put them together and get it on the car. Right. Maybe it needs to go up as one. I might try and get these lower arms off. Surprisingly, I managed to buzz the nuts off without it turning. I then weld them back on a few more times. These are well on there. So I can see if I can gently tap them out through the subframe. It's extremely well on there. This could give me a fighting chance now. It's roughly in place, approximately centered. I got some cable ties to hold it there while it goes on the car. Okay, come on, we can do this, we can do this. I lifted the engine up slightly higher so I can try to align everything properly. I've got the subframe up into place. You can get an idea of the clearance as it's always been very tight. It's not touching the chassis leg there currently. It's very close though, but we have quite a good trajectory. I now need to make sure the rack is in the center. Should have made a mark before it went on the car. Roughly there. Yeah, okay. I don't want to say anything yet, but it's looking positive. The reason I say that is the engine is misaligned. I think it needs to go that way again. I need to make sure everything's square and true in that regard before I know if this will work. There's also a bit I can trim off the rack. That's just a mount for something which is kind of in the way a bit. Could give us more clearance. We'll try and sort that. Get the engine square and then we'll go from there. After a bit more thought and some carefully considered alignment, it's time to assess things once again. It's pretty crazy. You see the corner cut out of the sump. Doesn't have it on the other side. It perfectly lines up with that piece. It's pretty mental. We may have to do a tiny bit more trimming along there. The linkage here clears the manifold, which is most important. I've dropped it back off. I'm going to make a few more little mods. I'm going to trim the bracket off this, and I want to take a bit more material out of this area, just on the edge, so I have a bit more adjustment. More trimming done. That's all ready to go back on. Thinking ahead slightly, in regards to the engine mounts, I'm going to put this back on the engine to see if it will work in line with this setup. It should end up around there somewhere. But I think now's a good opportunity to bolt it to the car, see if it works, because soon I'm going to have to think about this. Just two in will do for now, as currently the strap's in the way of that one, and I can't be asked to do that tricky one at the moment. I'll hoik this back onto the car, and then we'll see what else we need to chop and change and modify and generally cause me a lot more work. You know what? I'm afraid to say, but this could actually work quite well, in fact. It's not to say the tolerances are minute, and I may have to do a tiny bit more trimming off of there, but overall I think this could be the way forward. As the rack body from the M3 is a bit bigger than the Z4 one, I'll check it with the lower arms just to make sure we have no contact in this area. And then once I'm happy with that, I need to start mocking up a mount so we can get it in its place. And once again, we need to dead square the engine. I'm hoping this is one of the final times I need to cut anything off this subframe. Of course, we need to do some strengthening and engine mounts and general mods like that, but just purely the butchery, I'm hoping that's the end of it. One thing though, I am getting better at getting this on the car easily. I've spaced out the engine and subframe with my block of wood, which is set for the height of the engine to be as low as I think it can go. I'll take off the jack on the underside. I can loosen this support. I'm hoping the engine will then just sit flat. As long as I precisely get this engine in place and I find the sweet spot when it comes to locating the position of this rack, I have quite a lot of wiggle room. It clears the mount, sump, exhaust manifold. It's looking positive. We may have actually cracked this engine alignment steering problem. There's a lot more to figure out, but I'm happy with the progress so far. I'm now going to see how the lower arms fit in line with the M3 rack. You should be able to see how close the gap will be in there. My concern is going to be contact in that area. I'll try and hold the rack in place where I think it's going to go, and we'll see what's what. It could end up around there. What I'm trying to say is, I think we should just have enough clearance. Now that we have come up with the solid plan for the engine subframe, I need to start by fabricating a new mount for the rack to bolt to the frame. Before I removed it from the car, I did make note of where it needs to be approximately. To start with, we're just going to get something mocked up, which can easily be adapted and changed to suit. To start, we just need to get something on there so we have something to work from. I take some reference points, which will help me in a moment or two. Then I can get the rack up into place and gauge what kind of angle the new bracket has to be for it to work properly. And once I think it makes sense in my head, I can start cutting the old bracket off. There wasn't enough material on there just to adapt what I already had, so we have to come up with something brand new. As I cut around the subframe, I try not to get too close to where the two pressed bits of metal join together, as I don't want to cut through any spot welds. All I want to do is simply remove that bracket that holds the rack on. Once it's removed, I can then get my handy profiling tool to record the shape of the side of the subframe, which I will need to tack the new mounts onto. It's a super handy tool and saves a lot of time with cutting cardboard up, trimming, profiling. Using this thing, usually you get it right first time. I choose to upcycle some of the M3 parts. These were bolted into the back of the E93. I have no use for them now. They're not really a saleable item, so it makes sense to just utilize the raw metal. They also have lots of folds, pressed areas for strength, so to be honest, it's perfect material to use for this job. I decided to make the mount in two halves, two pieces which are already relatively close to the profile I need, and if I tap them to the frame in symmetry, it shouldn't look too bad either, apart from my welds. Once I get the two pieces cut out, I can now grab my profiling tool, but before I make the line on the back of the plate, and after checking the bracket will be thick enough after I cut this profile out, I can flip the pieces over and trace out my profile. Initially, I'll just cut the one side out, offer it up to the subframe and see if it's suitable. Once I've done that and I'm happy, which I am, I can then cut the other side out. It's just a straight repeat procedure, but mirror imaged, so I need to make sure I flip the shape on the other side so it follows the curve of the subframe. Once I've cut the second piece out, I clean up the areas of the subframe where I need to tack those pieces on, and not forgetting to prep the two bits that are going on. Now I need to tack it all together. I will blame my questionable welding on the overspray on my mask. I couldn't see much. With it secured in place, I now need to offer up the steering rack to check it's in the area I need it to be, and importantly that the plate I've welded on is at the right angle so the rack can be mounted flush to the bracket. Once I'm happy with all of that, I can then put a few more tacks on so it's strong enough to bash it around a bit when I get it on the car and it can hold a bit of force. With it all tacked together, I now need to make the marks where I need to drill the holes through. I have measured the gap between the mounting holes on the rack. I now need to transfer that to the brackets. I measure from the center point of the subframe, which is in fact where I butted the two brackets together, which did make for a good reference line. The gap between the center holes was 300 millimeters, so it was a simple calculation with a ruler. I then start with a small drill bit to make a pilot hole, repeatedly checking that the gap is correct. Now would be the point to make any minor corrections if you didn't get it quite right before you make the holes too big. Once I drilled out the holes big enough, I could then test fit the rack, hoping that the bolts will just fit straight through. I've got it aligned first time magically, but these OE brackets now are stopping it rotating to where it needs to be to have good clearance around here. So now I need to cut these off. I quickly remove the pair of top brackets with the grinder, allowing me to free up enough movement on the steering rack to space it out where we think it needs to go. When I'm content it will work, I then remove further material from those two brackets to make room for some new ones. It's been threatening to rain, so I just want to get these on. Just made up some rough mounts for the other side just to see if it works. I'm just going to tack everything on for now. The brackets I've just cut off are going to be quite easily relocated just to test where it needs to be. This won't be the final setup, but they're perfect for this stage. Once I've bolted both of them up tight to the rack, I can then tack them back to the frame. It ain't pretty, but it's good enough to test it. We're going to end the day on a high. or a very disappointing low. Your guess is as good as mine. With the subframe and steering rack still bolted together and it cooled down enough for me to hold it, I can then offer it up on the car again. Again, I'm really hoping this is going to be our solution. Until all of the 4 bolts are done up tight on the subframe, I won't fully know. You can see the steering from here. It looks like it's at a weird angle. I haven't dare looked yet. Still have to get the engine in place as well. That's the subframe on. What's happened there then? That's completely jammed up. It's going to end on a low. Unfortunately today it's not going to end with success. I think I know what I've done wrong. You see the column is touching the engine mount, but it's jammed up the top as well. I haven't twisted the steering rack up enough, so the line that goes up between the manifold and past the engine mount is not correct, which isn't a big deal. All I have to do is adjust the last 2 brackets I welded on and then go for another fit. In fact, I'm going to do that now. It shouldn't take long. I've re-welded it, let's see what it's like. It's touching the chassis leg. I did kind of predict that it would. I'm happy to notch it slightly so I can get this alignment better towards that a bit more. We're now clearing the engine mount. Yeah, it's very minimal, so it's just touching the side. I think we're making progress, guys and girls. Probably afford to get the engine lower as well. We shall proceed tomorrow. Okay then, we're back to it. Having a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Look at this. I think I want to try one more time to get it even better. If I bring the angle of the rack up more, it will improve the angle of this shaft. Even once we've notched the chassis leg, I think it will save me a lot of grief down the line. And the fact I still have really good clearance here means there is not a lot stopping me from twisting it further towards the front of the car. I've got clearance around there. You can see how it's really close to the manifold there and still reasonably close to the engine mount. While we're at this stage, we may as well get it right. I'll whip it off, tack it together, and then I'll show you the progress. I have taken it back out and I've re-welded it. I actually took the bottom one off and started from scratch again so I could get a good pitch on the mount. I am glad I did it. I haven't actually fitted it to the car yet, so I hope it's not worse. But I couldn't adjust this too much because where the lower arm goes up through the subframe and be able to do it up. So I've literally got it as close as I can in order to be able to do the nut up. I'm hoping it's still going to work. You know the drill now. I'll get it on the car and we'll see what's what. It's back on, and to be honest, there's not a lot of change from the last time it was on there. It may have moved a mil or two, but not enough to visually notice. I'm happy at this stage. We're clearing most things apart from the chassis leg, and it is being manipulated slightly. I can put some force on it and move it a bit. Ultimately, until we make a notch, we don't know its final resting place. But I think that's enough to move on to something else. I am keen to figure out a way of mounting the engine and utilising that position. I may have to have a small spacer to make sure there is enough room around the steering column. Don't forget, we still have to put some hard lines in there. If I put this lower arm back on, then I can see exactly what space we're dealing with. When it comes to the mount, that's the sensible next move. But I will start by getting the engine sat back down on the subframe. I need to work out the final spacer I'm going to have. I want the engine as low as possible, as I don't want too much of a bonnet bulge, but equally I don't want the sump too low to the ground. So it's just a massive game of compromising and figuring out what's best for everything. We're really using race technology here. I've gone for this little piece of wood as my official spacer. I'll get that in there, then we'll drop it down. I use my other official spacer. The lower I go, it also helps with the steering geometry, spacing problem. You can also get the engine back ever so slightly. Healthy noises. Another thing I need to figure out is how much rake to put on this engine. At the moment, I'm just guessing how high the transmission needs to be in the tunnel. If it can be dropped down, again, that's another thing that will severely help with the steering. In order to get the engine square in the bay and to make my life a bit easier, I'm going to remove the heat protector off this side, like I've done on the offside. I'll try and whip this off, then we can gauge exactly what clearance we're dealing with. With the engine safely supported on the subframe, now I can completely remove the engine hoist, which is just getting in the way, to be honest. It's quite nice not to be lying under the car for 5 minutes as well. The bolts that hold the heat shield on for the manifold, even though you can't see them, they're actually relatively easy to get to and remove. There is a set that run across the top, mixing between 13mm and 10mm bolts. There's a tab at the bottom of it that actually fits into the engine mount itself. Then finally at the front on the side of the engine, there's one remaining bolt before I can get it free. I do have this half removed. It's completely wedged though. I'm going to try and push the engine over. Success! I can now get eyes on that corner, that corner. I need to work out how to align the front. Fortunately, the engine is quite easy to move. At the moment, we're sat a bit too far that way. Like you can see, there's a fair bit of movement. Okay, we've established the engine cannot go any further towards the back of the car, as it will interfere with our hard work here. Height at the front, it can't go any lower, it can go higher, but no lower. The question is now, I need to move the engine over as it is, that way, ever so slightly, as we're pretty much touching on the manifold there, and then we've got a good amount of daylight on that side. I want to check how the gearbox is doing in the tunnel, see if it's moved. The front of the engine does need to be lifted over. Just don't think I have the strength to do it. Oh, I do. Too far. Small adjustments now. Think small adjustments. Too far again. Can't win. We're getting somewhere. That's pretty good. Let's check if it's level now from side to side. With the engine and gearbox supported on such a small area, one tiny piece of wood at the front on the subframe, then one single mount towards the back under the gearbox, it doesn't take much for this engine to move a lot. And with all the different areas I need to keep clearance on, it takes a lot of fiddling around to get this right. That's pretty square. It is currently perfect. We're trying to stop it twisting back. Wanting to lean that way. Engine is sweet. It's just now down to the height of the gearbox. How much rake we're going to have on the whole thing. Right, where were we? Yes, engine mounts. And before I test fit my remaining intact mount that isn't completely bust apart, I want to get the lower arms on. Already we can see we're going to have a big issue when it comes to mounting this engine because we have this lower arm right in the way where we want to place it. That's going to be fun. Just for entertainment, I'll put this one on. Similar problem this side. Surprise. Before I think about how I'm going to address this problem, if you haven't caught on, I'll demonstrate simply my issue. Yeah, that's the problem. I've had a little pondering to think off camera about the engine mount related issue. I will get under the car now and do my best to transfer my thinking over to you. My thought process on how this is going to work. Where do I start? Okay, this is a standard M3 engine mount. The issue we have is too tall for the application we need. Now, before I knew this, my plan all along was to get some upgraded Vibratechnics ones, which look pretty much like this one, but they're much posher and they're for fast road use. Ideal for this build, but they are physically the same size, so we're still going to have the height issue. You can get some cheap polyurethane ones, the same material that make up bushings, like Powerflex for example. If I get a set of those, I can machine them down to the height required. If I do run a modded mount, it makes sense to extend the subframe. I need to strengthen this anyway. It makes sense to utilize the space we have, make it much thicker, then bring the profile out and make the pad for the engine mount symmetrically the same on either side. One more thing we need to consider are the hydraulic lines for the rack. You can see there's not a lot of space around the front of the rack, well, barely any at all, so these will have to probably run somewhere down the back. They go up to the join under there. We need to make sure custom pipes similar to the standard ones, we need to make sure they fit. There's enough room on that one, and then there's one up under here. Yeah, that will work fine. When it comes to strengthening the frame, we need to account for where those lines are going to run, make sure they work together. The main problem in regards to strength, you can see where the Z4 engine was mounted, really close to the main part of the frame, making it nice and strong. The fact we're going back with the mount position, if we make a platform extending from this subframe as far out as there, it will be really weak. No matter what we do here, it's not going to be strong enough for the V8. I need to support the platform from that side. And that brings me on to the next issue, which is the exhaust manifold is hitting the mount for the lower arm. I have looked at the level of the gearbox and it can afford to go down slightly, which I am keen to do for centre of gravity. That will worsen that clearance there. To deal with that, the easiest solution for that is to drop this mount slightly further to the ground, which is fairly simple to do with the spacer and realigning the hole slightly. At this point, if you're still following, dropping that would actually aid my engine mount issue, as part of the platform could actually be mounted underneath this using these two mount points that go into the chassis. If set up right, it could be the spacer I need to get this down to clear the exhaust. To summary, if we strengthen the subframe all the way across in that gap, then make a platform that comes out almost like a triangle shape, a nice rigid poly mount at the right angle there, could work well. There'll be plenty of strength. As you can see how basic that is, and that's holding that Z4 engine, which is actually a similar weight to the M3. I appreciate there's a lot to figure out, but at least at this point we have a basic roadmap of what we have to do. It's been a challenging roller coaster so far. If you're enjoying the build as much as I am, hit the like button, and if you want to help me build this V8 powered Z4, leave a comment down below, preferably good ideas. Go subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode.